Bronson was a bull nobody wanted. At 2,800 pounds of pure muscle and standing nearly 6 feet tall at the shoulder, the massive black Angus should have been the pride of Willowbrook Ranch in rural Georgia. Instead, he spent his days alone in the far pasture, rejected by his own herd and considered too aggressive by ranch owner Marcus Thompson, who had been trying to sell him for months without success. "That bull's got a mean streak a mile wide," Marcus often told potential buyers, watching Bronson pace the fence line like a caged predator. "He's attacked 3 ranch hands and won't let any of the other cattle near him. I'm about ready to send him to the slaughterhouse if I can't find someone willing to take him." The truth was more complicated than Marcus understood. Bronson wasn't mean by nature. He was protecting himself from a world that had shown him nothing but rejection and cruelty since he was a calf. Born smaller than his siblings, he had been pushed aside by stronger bulls and treated as an outsider by every herd he'd ever encountered. Dr. Amanda Foster, the ranch veterinarian, was one of the few people who saw past Bronson's aggressive reputation to recognize the intelligence and pain behind his fierce brown eyes. "He's not evil," she would argue with Marcus during their frequent discussions about the bull's future. "He's scared and lonely. Animals like Bronson become defensive when they've been hurt too many times." But Marcus had made up his mind. The insurance costs of keeping an aggressive bull were too high, and the liability of someone getting seriously hurt was a risk he couldn't afford to take. Bronson had 1 week left before Marcus would make the call that would end his life permanently. The rejected bull seemed to sense his precarious situation, spending his days standing motionless near the old oak tree at the edge of his pasture, staring out at the world that had never accepted him. His massive frame cast long shadows in the Georgia heat, and his breathing created small clouds of dust that settled around his hooves like a shroud. "It's not fair," whispered Sarah Martinez, Marcus's pregnant ranch hand, as she watched Bronson from a safe distance. At 7 months pregnant with her first child, Sarah had developed an unexpected sympathy for the outcast bull, perhaps recognizing something of her own struggles as a single mother, trying to make it in a world that often seemed hostile to those who were different. Sarah was the only person on the ranch who spoke gently to Bronson when she passed his pasture during her daily rounds. "I know you're not as mean as they think you are," she would tell him through the fence. "You're just tired of being hurt, aren't you, big guy?" Bronson would lift his massive head when Sarah spoke to him, his intelligent eyes following her movements with an attention that seemed almost human in its intensity. Dr. Foster had noticed this interaction and found it fascinating that the aggressive bull showed such calm behavior around the pregnant woman. "He's gentle with her," Dr. Foster observed to Marcus during one of Sarah's visits to Bronson's pasture. "Look at his body language. No aggression, no tension. That bull knows she's carrying a baby, and something about that makes him protective rather than threatening." But Marcus remained unconvinced, focused more on liability concerns than on the subtle behavioral changes Dr. Foster had documented. "1 week, he repeated firmly. "If I can't find a buyer by Friday, Bronson's going to the processing plant. I can't risk him hurting someone, especially not Sarah in her condition." The countdown had begun for Bronson, but the rejected bull continued his daily routine of standing beneath the oak tree, watching the world that had condemned him while showing moments of unexpected gentleness toward the one person who had treated him with kindness. What none of them knew was that Bronson's greatest test was approaching, a moment that would prove whether he was the dangerous beast everyone believed him to be, or something entirely different. The answer would come in the form of a deadly threat that would force the rejected bull to choose between his own safety and protecting someone who had shown him the only kindness he had ever known. Have you ever encountered an animal that others considered dangerous but showed a different side to you? What do you think makes some animals seem aggressive when they might just be protecting themselves? The morning that would change everything started like any other day at Willowbrook Ranch, with Sarah Martinez making her rounds to check the water troughs and fence lines throughout the property. 7 months pregnant and moving more slowly than usual, she carried a clipboard with her daily checklist while mentally preparing for the conversation she planned to have with Marcus about finding Bronson a sanctuary instead of sending him to slaughter. "Just 3 more stops," Sarah murmured to herself, checking off completed tasks as she approached the wooded area near Bronson's pasture, where the ranch's natural spring provided water for the livestock. The Georgia humidity was already building, despite the early hour, and she was looking forward to finishing her round so she could rest in the air-conditioned office. Bronson stood in his usual spot beneath the oak tree, his massive black frame motionless except for the occasional swish of his tail to ward off flies. The rejected bull's intelligent brown eyes tracked Sarah's movement as they always did, and she offered him her customary, gentle greeting. "Morning, Bronson," she called softly through the fence. "Only a few more days before Marcus makes his decision. I'm going to try talking to him again today about finding you a better home." The bull's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, and he took a few steps toward the fence in the cautious approach that had become their daily ritual. Sarah smiled, appreciating this one moment of connection in what had become an increasingly stressful situation for everyone involved. But as Sarah knelt to examine the spring mechanism that controlled the water flow, a movement in the tall grass caught her attention. What she initially dismissed as a fallen branch revealed itself to be something far more dangerous. A massive green python, at least 12 feet long and thick as a man's thigh, coiled in the shade just 3 feet from where she was working. If this incredible story of an unexpected hero and the life or death moment that changed everything touches your heart, we'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more amazing stories like this one about the extraordinary courage that emerges when innocent lives are threatened, and the incredible bonds that can form between humans and animals that society has labeled as dangerous. Every subscription and like means the world to us and helps these remarkable tales of unexpected heroism reach people who need to see that sometimes our greatest protectors come from the most unlikely sources. Thank you for being part of our community that celebrates the amazing moments when rejected souls prove their true worth by risking everything to save others. The python's head rose with predatory focus, its cold eyes locked onto Sarah as she froze in terror, realizing that any sudden movement could trigger an attack from one of nature's most efficient killing machines. The massive snake had obviously been hunting in the area and saw the pregnant woman as either a threat to defend against or prey to eliminate. Sarah's training as a ranch hand had taught her about the dangerous wildlife that occasionally wandered onto the property, but she had never encountered anything this large or this close. The python's coiled body suggested it was preparing to strike, and at 7 months pregnant, Sarah knew she couldn't move quickly enough to escape if the snake decided to attack. "Help!" she whispered, her voice barely audible as fear paralyzed her ability to call out loudly enough for anyone to hear. The nearest ranch hand was at least a quarter-mile away, and her radio had fallen from her belt when she knelt down, now lying uselessly just out of reach. The python began to uncoil slowly, its massive body revealing the true scope of the threat Sarah was facing. This wasn't just a large snake. It was an apex predator capable of crushing the life out of a full-grown adult. And Sarah's pregnancy made her even more vulnerable to an attack that could kill both her and her unborn child. Bronson's behavior changed instantly when he saw the python. The rejected bull's entire demeanor shifted from calm observation to intense alertness as he recognized the deadly threat facing the one person who had shown him kindness. His massive head lifted, his nostrils flared, and a low rumbling sound emerged from deep in his chest. "Bronson," Sarah whispered desperately, her eyes meeting those of the bull who everyone considered too dangerous to keep alive. "Please help me." The python's head swayed hypnotically as it calculated the distance for its strike, while Sarah remained frozen in a crouch that left her completely vulnerable to an attack that would come with lightning speed and devastating force. The snake's tongue flicked out repeatedly, tasting the air and confirming that its target was within range. What happened next would shatter every assumption Marcus, Dr. Foster, and the entire ranch community had made about the nature of the bull they had condemned as irredeemably aggressive. Bronson's response to Sarah's crisis would prove that sometimes society's outcasts possess the greatest capacity for heroism when innocent lives hang in the balance. Do you think animals can sense when humans are in danger? Have you ever seen an animal overcome their own fears to protect someone they care about? What Bronson did next defied every law of physics and animal behavior that anyone at Willowbrook Ranch thought they understood. The 2,800-pound bull, who had been labeled as uncontrollably aggressive, made a split-second decision that would transform him from outcast to hero in the most spectacular way imaginable. With a thunderous bellow that echoed across the entire ranch, Bronson charged directly at the fence separating him from Sarah and the massive python. The wooden rails and metal posts that had contained him for months exploded like matchsticks as his enormous frame crashed through the barrier with the force of a freight train. Sarah watched in amazement and terror as Bronson launched himself between her and the coiled python just as the snake struck with lightning speed. The bull's timing was perfect. His massive shoulder caught the python's head in mid-strike, deflecting the attack that would have been fatal for both Sarah and her unborn child. "Bronson, no!" Sarah screamed, realizing that the bull was now facing a deadly predator that could easily kill him if it managed to wrap around his neck or legs. The python was easily large enough to constrict even an animal of Bronson's size, and its fury at being denied an easy kill made it even more dangerous. The python immediately shifted its attack to Bronson, its massive coils striking out like whips as it tried to wrap around the bull's legs and bring him down. But Bronson's intelligence and protective instincts guided his every move as he used his superior weight and powerful hooves to keep the snake from gaining a lethal hold. Dr. Foster, who had heard Bronson's bellow from the main barn, arrived at a dead run just in time to witness the most extraordinary display of animal heroism she had ever seen. "He's protecting her," she breathed, watching as Bronson deliberately kept his body positioned between Sarah and the python, while fending off the snake's increasingly desperate attacks. The battle between bull and python was unlike anything anyone had imagined possible. Bronson used his massive hooves to pin sections of the snake's body to the ground, while avoiding its attempts to coil around his legs, demonstrating a tactical intelligence that amazed everyone watching. "Get back, Sarah!" Dr. Foster shouted, helping the pregnant woman move to safety while Bronson continued his incredible fight against the python. "Let him handle this. He knows what he's doing." Marcus Thompson arrived with several ranch hands just as Bronson delivered the decisive blow. Using his enormous weight and the pointed tips of his hooves, the bull managed to pin the python's head to the ground, with enough force to stun the massive snake without killing it outright. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Marcus whispered, watching as Bronson held the python motionless while continuing to position himself protectively near Sarah. That bull just risked his life to save her from a snake that could have killed them both. The python, recognizing that it was outmatched and unable to escape Bronson's hold, eventually went limp in the universal animal signal of submission. The bull held his position for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was completely neutralized before carefully stepping back and allowing the stunned snake to slither away into the woods. "He could have killed that python easily," Dr. Foster observed in amazement, "but he chose to neutralize the threat without unnecessary violence. That's not the behavior of an aggressive animal. That's the action of an intelligent protector." Sarah, now safe but shaking from the encounter, approached Bronson with tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life," she whispered, reaching out to touch the massive bull's neck. "You and my baby are alive because of what you did." Bronson's response to Sarah's gratitude was the gentlest anyone had ever seen from the supposedly dangerous bull. He lowered his enormous head until it was level with her hand, allowing her to stroke his neck while making soft rumbling sounds that seemed designed to comfort rather than intimidate. "This changes everything," Marcus admitted, his voice filled with shame as he realized how wrong he had been about Bronson's true nature. "I've been planning to send the bravest animal on this ranch to slaughter because I was too blind to see what he really was." The destroyed fence and the evidence of Bronson's heroic battle with the python told a story that would spread throughout the ranching community and beyond. The rejected bull had proven that sometimes society's outcasts possess the greatest capacity for courage when innocent lives are at stake. Dr. Foster began documenting everything she had witnessed, knowing that Bronson's actions would challenge scientific understanding about animal intelligence, protective behavior, and the true meaning of heroism in the animal kingdom. What do you think motivated Bronson to risk everything for Sarah? Have you ever witnessed an act of animal heroism that changed your entire perspective on what animals are capable of? Word of Bronson's heroic rescue spread through the Georgia ranching community like wildfire, bringing visitors from neighboring counties who wanted to see the bull who had risked his life to save a pregnant woman from a deadly python attack. But the most profound changes were happening right at Willowbrook Ranch, where everyone's understanding of the dangerous bull had been completely transformed. Marcus Thompson spent sleepless nights replaying his decision to send Bronson to slaughter, haunted by the realization that he had come within days of destroying the most heroic animal he had ever encountered. I was so focused on liability and insurance costs that I never bothered to understand what was really going on with him, Marcus confessed to Dr. Foster during one of their many conversations about Bronson's future. Sarah Martinez had become Bronson's most vocal advocate, sharing her story with anyone who would listen about how the rejected bull had literally saved her life and the life of her unborn child. Everyone saw his aggression, she explained to visitors, but nobody saw his pain. Bronson wasn't mean. He was protecting himself from a world that had never shown him kindness. The most remarkable change was in Bronson himself. With the knowledge that he was no longer facing death and surrounded by people who finally appreciated his true nature, the massive bull's demeanor underwent a complete transformation. The aggressive posturing and defensive behavior that had characterized his interactions with humans disappeared, replaced by the gentle intelligence that Dr. Foster had always suspected lay beneath his protective facade. "He's like a completely different animal," ranch hand Miguel Rodriguez observed, watching as Bronson allowed Sarah to brush his coat and check for any injuries from his battle with the python. "It's like he was waiting his whole life for someone to see him as more than just a dangerous beast." Dr. Foster had been documenting Bronson's behavioral changes for a research paper on animal psychology and protective instincts. "This case challenges everything we thought we knew about animal aggression," she explained to a group of veterinary students who had come to observe Bronson. "What we labeled as dangerous behavior was actually a complex response to trauma and social rejection." The physical evidence of Bronson's heroism was still visible around the ranch. The destroyed fence where he had broken through to reach Sarah, and the churned earth where he had battled the massive python. Marcus had decided to leave the fence partially damaged as a reminder of how wrong his judgment had been about the bull's character. "I'm rebuilding this fence differently," Marcus announced to his ranch hands. "Bronson's not going to be confined to that back pasture anymore. He's earned the right to graze with the rest of the herd and be treated like the protector he's proven himself to be." The integration of Bronson with the other cattle was a gradual process, but the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The bull, who had been rejected by every herd he'd encountered, began showing leadership qualities, positioning himself protectively around the younger cattle and demonstrating the same gentle strength he had shown with Sarah. "Look at how the other animals respond to him now," Sarah pointed out during one of her daily visits to Bronson's new pasture. "They're not afraid of him anymore. They trust him to keep them safe." Local news stations had picked up the story of Bronson's rescue, bringing reporters and camera crews to document the transformation of the rejected bull into a celebrated hero. But for Bronson, the attention seemed less important than the simple fact that he was finally being treated with the respect and kindness he had always deserved. "Fame doesn't matter to him," Dr. Foster observed, watching as Bronson calmly allowed reporters to film him while he grazed peacefully among the other cattle. "What matters is that he's no longer an outcast. He's found his place in the world, and it's exactly where he always belonged." The approaching birth of Sarah's baby had created an additional bond between her and Bronson that amazed everyone who witnessed it. The bull seemed to understand that Sarah was nearing her due date, and his protective behavior around her had intensified in a way that suggested an almost supernatural awareness of her condition. "He positions himself between Sarah and anything he perceives as a potential threat," Marcus noted, watching as Bronson carefully monitored Sarah's movements around the ranch. "It's like he's appointed himself as her permanent bodyguard." The transformation was complete when Marcus officially announced that Bronson would never leave Willowbrook Ranch and that the bull would be given a place of honor as the ranch's official protector. The death sentence that had hung over Bronson just weeks earlier had been replaced with a lifetime guarantee of safety and respect. How do you think being finally accepted and valued changed Bronson's entire personality? Have you ever seen someone or something bloom when they finally found where they belonged? 6 months after the python rescue that changed his life forever, Bronson had become the most celebrated bull in Georgia, but his greatest moment was yet to come. Sarah Martinez was about to give birth to her daughter, and the massive bull who had saved both their lives was about to receive the ultimate reward for his heroism. the chance to meet the baby he had protected before she was even born. The call came at 3 a.m. on a warm September morning when Sarah went into labor. Dr. Foster rushed to the hospital while Marcus arranged for special permission to bring Bronson to visit the maternity ward, an unprecedented request that was granted only because of the extraordinary circumstances of their story. "She's here," Sarah whispered through tears of joy as she held her healthy daughter for the first time. "Emma Grace Martinez, and she's perfect." The baby's middle name honored the grace that had brought Bronson into their lives at exactly the right moment to save them both. Emma Grace would grow up knowing that her life had been protected by a gentle giant who had risked everything for a pregnant woman who had shown him kindness. "Bronson needs to meet her," Sarah told Dr. Foster through the hospital window. "He protected her before she was born. He deserves to know she's safe." The sight of a 2,800-pound bull being led carefully through the hospital parking lot drew crowds of staff and visitors who had heard about the legendary rescue. Bronson walked calmly beside Marcus, his intelligent eyes focused on the building where Sarah and the baby he had protected were waiting. "Easy, big guy," Marcus said softly, his voice filled with the respect and affection that had replaced his former fear of the bull. "You're about to meet the little girl whose life you saved." When Bronson saw Sarah holding baby Emma through the window, his entire demeanor changed to one of gentle recognition and protective satisfaction. The massive bull pressed his nose against the glass, releasing soft rumbling sounds that seemed designed to comfort both mother and child. Emma Grace, despite being only hours old, turned her tiny head toward the sound of Bronson's voice with the same recognition that had characterized Sarah's bond with the bull. "She knows him," Sarah whispered in amazement. "She knows his voice." Dr. Foster documented every moment of this unprecedented meeting between the bull and the baby he had saved, recognizing that she was witnessing something extraordinary in the annals of animal behavior and human-animal bonds. "This is the completion of his protective instinct," Dr. Foster explained to the gathered crowd. "Bronson risked his life to save this baby, and now he's seeing the successful outcome of his sacrifice. This is what heroism looks like in the animal kingdom." The local community had come together to honor Bronson's heroism with a permanent memorial garden at Willowbrook Ranch, featuring a statue of the bull and a plaque describing his rescue of Sarah and baby Emma. But for Bronson, the greatest honor was simply being allowed to continue his role as their protector. "He's not just a bull anymore," Marcus told the reporters who continued to follow their story. "He's a member of our family, and he's Emma's guardian for life. That little girl will grow up with the safest protector in the world watching over her." Sarah returned to work at the ranch 6 weeks after Emma's birth, bringing the baby with her in a specially designed carrier that allowed Bronson to see and protect both of them during their daily routines. The sight of the massive bull gently watching over the tiny infant became the symbol of Willowbrook Ranch. "Look how he positions himself," visitors would observe in amazement, watching as Bronson created a protective barrier around Sarah and Emma while they went about their work. "That bull understands he's responsible for their safety." Emma Grace thrived under the dual protection of her mother's love and Bronson's vigilant guardianship. The baby who had been saved before birth by a rejected bull was growing into a confident, joyful child who showed no fear of the massive animal who had become her devoted protector. "She reaches for him whenever she sees him," Sarah noted, watching as 6-month-old Emma stretched her tiny hands toward Bronson's enormous face. "She knows he's family." The transformation of Bronson from rejected outcast to beloved hero had inspired people throughout Georgia and beyond who were struggling with their own rejection and feelings of worthlessness. His story proved that sometimes society's outcasts possess the greatest capacity for love and heroism when given the chance to prove their worth. Bronson taught us that dangerous and protective aren't the same thing, Dr. Foster wrote in her research paper about the case. "He was never aggressive, he was guarded. Once he found someone worthy of his protection, he revealed his true nature as one of the gentlest and most heroic animals I've ever encountered." As Emma Grace took her first steps in the pasture under Bronson's watchful eye, the rejected bull who had once faced death now stood as the guardian of new life, proving that the greatest heroes often come from the most unexpected places. The bull who nobody wanted had become the protector everyone needed, completing a story of redemption that would inspire generations to look beyond surface appearances to find the heroes hiding in plain sight. The woman who had shown kindness to an outcast bull now watched her daughter grow up under the protection of the gentlest giant in Georgia, knowing that sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as the very creatures society tells us to fear. How has Bronson's story changed your perspective on judging others too quickly? Do you believe that everyone deserves a chance to show their true character when it matters most? Rejected Bull was resting until a green python attacked a pregnant woman. What he did shocked all.